If you put everything we discussed together, a clear pattern begins to emerge. What we have been observing over the past 25 years is not simply economic growth, but a structural shift in how countries position themselves within the global system. In the first step, we saw how China's exports evolved from labor-intensive goods to industrial products and then to high technology system, while its imports shifted from machinery and technology towards raw material and resources. This shift reflects a deeper transition from acquiring capability to supplying inputs for a system that has already been built. In the next step, we examined supply chains and found that nearly half of China's exports now consist of intermediate goods, which are not final products but essential inputs used by other producers. This means that China is no longer operating at the edge of the system, but increasingly inside the production process itself. We then moved to energy and saw that energy is not merely a cost, but a structural factor that determines stability and control, especially as the shift from oil to electricity. It changes the dependency from the fuel-based system to a system-based capacity. And finally, we examined constraints and saw that transition to new energy system doesn't eliminate limits, but instead shift them from technology to resources, redefining where the system boundary actually lie. And this is where everything connects once industrial capability, supply chain integration, energy system, and resources exercise come together. They form something larger than individual advantages, and they form complete system. And the system do not scale evenly. They differentiate. From a higher perspective, what we are seeing is not global convergence, but a structural divergence, where countries are no longer becoming more similar, but increasingly defined by their position within interconnected systems. This leads to a simple but a powerful outcome. The world is gradually splitting to two types of countries. The first type consists of countries that can combine resources, industrial capability, the supply chain, and the energy system into coherent and scalable structure. These countries do not simply produce goods. They organize production, allocate inputs, and influence how value is created and distributed across the system. In other words, they do not just participate in the global economy, they shape how it operates. The second type consists of countries that depend on these systems. They rely on external energy, external resources, and their external supply chain to sustain their economic activity, which allow them to grow, to participate in trade, but limit their ability to influence the structure of the system itself. The difference between these two groups is not simply income, size, even technology in isolation. It is a system capability, the ability to integrate production, energy, resources, and logistics into a stable and scalable whole. And once such a system is established, it becomes extremely difficult to replicate because each layer reinforces the others. Industrial systems require energy, the energy system require materials, and the supply chains depend on both, creating a self-reinforcing structure that strengthens over time. This is why the gap between countries is not closing, it is widening at a structural level. So a simpler way to understand the shift is this. In the past, participation in globalization was often sufficient for growth. Today, participation alone is no longer enough. And what matters is a position, where a country says within the system determines what it can control, and what it can control ultimately determines how much influence it has. So the real story of the past 25 years is not just that China grew, it is that China moved into a different position within the global system. And once a position changes, everything else follows. That is a deeper logic behind the data, and that is how the world is being reshaped.